The Maltese are an ethnic group indigenous to Malta, and identified with the Maltese language. Malta is an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Included within the ethnic group defined by the Maltese people are the Gossitans, who inhabit Malta's sister island, Gozo. History. Malta has been inhabited from around 5200 BC, since the arrival of settlers from the island of Sicily. A significant prehistoric Neolithic culture marked by megalithic structures, which date back to c. 3600 BC, existed on the islands, as evidenced by the temples of Najdra, Gantia, and others. The Phoenicians colonized Malta between 800–700 BC, bringing their Semitic language and culture. They used the islands as an outpost from which they expanded sea explorations and trade in the Mediterranean until their successors, the Carthaginians, were ousted by the Romans in 216 BC with the help of the Maltese inhabitants, under whom Malta became a municipium. After a period of Byzantine rule and a probable sack by the Vandals, the islands were invaded by the Aghlabids in AD 870. The fate of the population after the Arab invasion is unclear, but it seems the islands may have been completely depopulated and then later resettled by Muslims who brought with them the Siculo-Arabic language. The Muslim rulers were expelled from the islands by the Normans in 1091, and their leader Roger I of Sicily was welcomed by the native Christians. The islands were part of the Kingdom of Sicily until 1530, and were briefly controlled by the Capetian House of Anjou. In 1530 Charles I of Spain gave the Maltese Islands to the Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem in perpetual lease. The French under Napoleon took hold of the Maltese Islands in 1798. Although with the aid of the British the Maltese were able to oust French control 2 years later, the inhabitants subsequently asked Britain to assume sovereignty over the islands under the conditions laid out in a Declaration of Rights, stating that His Majesty has no right to cede these islands to any power, if he chooses to withdraw his protection, and abandon his sovereignty. The right of electing another sovereign, or of the governing of these islands, belongs to us, the inhabitants and aborigines alone, and without control. As part of the Treaty of Paris, Malta became a British colony, ultimately rejecting an attempted integration with the United Kingdom in 1956. Malta became independent on 21 September 1964. Under its 1964 constitution, Malta initially retained Queen Elizabeth II as Queen of Malta, with a Governor-General exercising executive authority on her behalf. On 13 December 1974 it became a republic within the Commonwealth, with the President as head of state. On 31 March 1979 Malta saw the withdrawal of the last British troops and the Royal Navy from Malta. This day is known as Freedom Day, and Malta declared itself as a neutral and non-aligned. Malta joined the European Union on 1 May 2004 and joined the Eurozone on 1 January 2008. Culture. The culture of Malta is a reflection of various cultures that have come into contact with the Maltese Islands throughout the centuries, including neighboring Mediterranean cultures, and the cultures of the nations that ruled Malta for long periods of time prior to its independence in 1964. The earliest inhabitants of the Maltese Islands are believed to have crossed over from nearby Sicily sometime before 5000 BC. The culture of modern Malta has been described as a rich pattern of traditions, beliefs and practices, which is the result of a long process of adaptation, assimilation and cross-fertilization of beliefs and usages drawn from various conflicting sources. It has been subjected to the same complex historic processes that gave rise to the linguistic and ethnic admixture that defines who the people of Malta and Gozo are today. Present-day Maltese culture is essentially Latin European, with the recent British legacy also in evidence. In the early part of its history, Malta was also exposed to Semitic influences. The present-day legacy of this is linguistic rather than cultural. The Latin European element is the major source of Maltese culture because of the virtually continuous cultural impact on Malta over the past 8 centuries and the fact that Malta shares the religious beliefs, traditions and ceremonies of its Sicilian and Southern European neighbors. Language: Maltese people speak the Maltese language, a Semitic language written in the Latin alphabet in its standard form. The language is descended from Siculo-Arabic, a dialect of Arabic spoken in Sicily. In the course of Malta's history, the language has adopted large amounts of vocabulary from Sicilian, Italian, English, and to a smaller degree, French. The official languages of Malta are Maltese and English. Maltese became an official language of Malta in 1934, replacing Italian and joining English. There are an estimated 371,900 speakers in Malta of the language, with statistics citing that 100% of the people are able to speak Maltese, 88% English, 66% Italian and 17% French, showing a greater degree of linguistic capabilities than most other European countries. In fact, multilingualism is a common phenomenon in Malta, with English, Maltese and Italian used in everyday life. Whilst Maltese is the national language, it has been suggested that with the ascendancy of English language shift may begin. However, this has been discredited by contemporary studies. Religion: the Constitution of Malta provides for freedom of religion but establishes Roman Catholicism as the state religion. Malta is described in the Book of Acts as the place where Paul the Apostle was shipwrecked on his way to Rome, awaiting trial. Freedom House and the World Fact Book report that 98% of the Maltese are Roman Catholic, making the nation one of the most Catholic countries in the world. Maltese emigration and expatriation. In the 19th century, most migration from Malta was to North Africa and the Middle East, although rates of return migration to Malta were high. Nonetheless, Maltese communities formed in these regions. By 1900, for example, British consular estimates suggest that there were 15,326 Maltese in Tunisia. Malta experienced significant emigration as a result of the collapse of a construction boom in 1907 and after World War II, when the birth rate increased significantly, but in the 20th century most emigrants went to destinations in the New World, particularly the United States and Australia. After World War II, Malta's Emigration Department would assist emigrants with the cost of their travel. Between 1948 and 1967, 30% of the population emigrated. Between 1946 and the late 1970s, over 140,000 people left Malta on the assisted passage scheme, with 57.6% migrating to Australia, 22% to the UK, 13% to Canada and 7% to the United States. 46,998 Maltese-born residents were recorded by the 2001 Australian census, 30,178 by the 2001 UK census, 9,525 by the 2001 Canadian census and 9,080 by the 2000 United States census. Emigration dropped dramatically after the mid-1970s and has since ceased to be a social phenomenon of significance. However, since Malta joined the EU in 2004, expatriate communities emerged in a number of European countries, particularly in Belgium and Luxembourg. Genetics. Y-DNA haplogroups are found at the following frequencies in Malta: R1, J, I, E, F, K, P. Haplogroup R1, I and J2 are typical in European populations, and E, K, F haplogroups consist of lineages with differential distribution within Middle East, North Africa and Europe. The study by Capelli et al. Has clustered the Maltese genetic markers with those of Sicilians and Calabrians and has shown that there is little genetic input from North Africa. The study indicates that Malta was indeed barely inhabited at the turn of the 10th century, and that repopulation is likely to have occurred by a clan or clans from neighboring Sicily and Calabria. Another study carried out by geneticists Spencer Wells and Pierre Zala of the American University of Beirut showed that more than 50% of Y chromosomes from Maltese men could have Phoenician origins. However, it has been noted that this latter study was published as an interview in a popular magazine which is not a peer-reviewed academic journal, and its conclusions disagree with the findings of the previously mentioned major peer-reviewed studies. Population links. The first settlers of Malta were from the island of Sicily. However, the result of the influences on the population after this have been fiercely debated among historians and geneticists. The origins question is complicated by numerous factors, including Malta's turbulent history of invasions and conquests, with long periods of depopulation followed by periods of immigration to Malta and intermarriage with the Maltese by foreigners from the Mediterranean, Western and Southern European countries that ruled Malta. The many demographic influences on the island include the Phoenician colonization around 800–700 BC, the exile to Malta of the entire male population of the town of Salerno in 1223, the stationing of Swabian and Sicilian Italian troops on Malta in 1240, the removal of all remaining Arabs from Malta in 1224, the arrival of several thousand Aragonese soldiers in 1283–1425, further waves of European repopulation throughout the 13th century, the settlement in Malta of noble families from Sicily and Aragon between 1372 and 1450, the arrival of several thousand Greek Rhodian sailors, soldiers and slaves with the Knights of St. John, the introduction of several thousand Sicilian laborers in 1551 and again in 1566, the emigration of some 891 Italian exiles to Malta during the Risorgimento in 1849, the posting of some 22,000 British servicemen in Malta from 1807 to 1979, as well as other British and Irish that settled in Malta over the decades, the mass emigration occurring after World War II and well into the 1960s and 70s. Many Maltese left the island for the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada and the USA. Following Malta's accession to the EU in 2004, expatriate communities grew in European countries such as the one in Belgium. Historical accounts over time, the various rulers of Malta published their own view of the ethnicity of the population. The Knights of Malta downplayed the role of Islam in Malta and promoted the idea of a continuous Roman Catholic presence, and the British colonial rule disregarded a genetic and cultural connection between the Maltese and Italians in an attempt to counteract growing fascist power in the area.